Good evening, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning if you're in Canada. I'm Stefano Dallaglio, and I am one of the team members at the Venice Center for Digital and Public Humanities at the Department of Humanities at Ca' Foscari University in Venice. This is a special event for at least a couple of reasons. First of all, this is the first seminar of the year, the seminar of the seminar series of the Venice Center for Digital and Public Humanities. And this is the first appointment for the academic year 2021-2022. We are going to have 5 more seminars from here to December, and then many more in the spring. This is a special event also because this is also a guest lecture for the course Introduction to Digital and Public Humanities, given by my colleague Franz Fischer and I for the master's program at the in Digital and Public Humanities. Once again, so this is a new opportunity that we have at Ca' Foscari in Venice, and I think it's a very interesting way of offering a new perspective to humanities students who want to approach the humanities from a completely different point of view. But this is a special event also because we have an outstanding couple of speakers. We are extremely honored today to have Ray Siemens and Alyssa Arbuckle. That I think this is going to be a very good opportunity to give a practical example of the fusion of these two aspects. The public aspect and the digital ones are not completely separated, and on the contrary, they can go together very well. And I think the work done by both the speakers give a very good opportunity of understanding how they can be combined, joining public or open scholarship and digital. On the practical side, just let me say that the seminar will be recorded. So should you step in to speak or write something in chat, please keep in mind this is going to be remembered for those at home or for the students in class, in case you want to say something and ask something to our speakers. But before introducing our speakers, I would like to give the floor to the director of the center, Franz Fischer, for a couple of introductory words. Franz.
Yeah, thank you very much, Stefano. So there's not very much to say from my side. Just thank you for organizing this. Thank you for Elena Alessandra, who's doing the technical support in the background in substitution for Elisa Corot, who has done this so far, but she's on maternity leave, so good luck for her and best wishes. Very warm welcome to our new students. So the second cohort of students for Digital and Public Humanities, our master program, and the second year students who started last year. And welcome to all the guests and participants from all around the globe. So you are very much invited to activate also your video, maybe for the discussion now when we will listen to Alyssa and Ray. You can leave it out if you like anyway. Yeah, we have several further seminars upcoming and interesting events, so just follow us on Twitter or mailing list and Instagram and what we have. In 2 weeks, there will be Niccolò Dell'Unto from Lund University talking about knowledge production in virtual space based on archaeological data. There are Digital Dante Days upcoming in November 15th and 16th, so you're the first to be informed about this. We will make an announcement very soon, and it will be an exciting event for Dante scholars, I'm sure. Just some students maybe also joined the opening lecture of Willard McCarthy of the second international conference of the European Association of Digital Humanities in Krasnoyevsk in Siberia. So it just has been opened with an exciting talk by Will McCarthy. And we have matadors also from our center presenting on Friday. So check up the program also for the other presentations. And yeah, I think that's enough. We are here today to listen to Alyssa and Ray about open social scholarship and engaged publics in digital humanities. So it's an ideal start for our seminar series, the autumn and winter cycle. And Stefano is now going to introduce you to the speakers, and then I'm looking forward to the presentation. And afterwards, there will be lots of room for discussion and questions. Thank you.
Yes, Franz. So Ray Siemens is Distinguished Professor in the Faculty of Humanities at the University of Victoria, Canada, in English and Computer Science. He also was Canada Research Chair in Humanities Computing. He was a Leverhulme Visiting Professor at the University of Loughborough and the Global Innovation Chair in Digital Humanities at the Center for the 21st Century Humanities at Newcastle. He's founding editor of the electronic scholarly journal Early Modern Literary Studies, and his publications include, among others, Companion to Digital Humanities with Blackwell, Companion to Digital Library Studies, and Social Edition of the Devonshire Manuscript. I'm not going to mention all the publication on all the things he has done because it would take all the evening. He directs the Implementing New Knowledge Environment project, the Digital Humanities Summer Institute, and the Electronic Textual Cultures Lab. And many other things, but I think this is more than enough to make you understand who we are going to listen to. Alyssa Arbuckle is the Associate Director of the Electronic Textual Cultures Lab at the University of Victoria, where she is operational lead for the Implementing New Knowledge Environments partnership and a co-facilitator of its connection cluster and co-director of Digital Humanities Summer Institute. She holds an interdisciplinary PhD from the University of Victoria, focusing on open social scholarship and its implementation. She holds a BA Honours in English from the University of Bristol, Columbia, and an MA in English from the University of Victoria. She explores open access, digital publishing, and other things. Among her publications, she has published works in digital studies, digital humanities quarterly, scholarly and research communications, and many more. Okay, today Alyssa and Ray are giving a talk entitled Open Social Scholarship and Engaged Publics in Digital Humanities. Ray and Alyssa, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you very much for the opportunity to share our work with you in this way and participate in the seminar, both the broader, more public-facing seminar, but also the one in the classroom that you mentioned. It's a real pleasure and honor to be a part of it. And Alyssa, as always, a pleasure to be co-presenting with you. When Alyssa and I speak, we work together quite frequently and in collaboration. And as we speak today, we're going to be going back and forth on some of the slides, in essence, sharing elements of our collaboration, but our collaboration extends beyond the two of us. And if you look on the title slide there, you'll see some of the others that we're involved with. We're really presenting on work that's associated with the INC, Implementing New Knowledge Environments Research Group, the Canadian Social Knowledge Institute, the Electronic Textual Cultures Lab, which is where we sit at the University of Victoria, but also individuals that some of you may be familiar with, including Luis Meneses, who's now in the Department of Computer Science at Vancouver Island University, Randa El-Khatib, Caroline Winter, Graham Jensen, all at UVic in the Electronic Textual Cultures Lab, but many, many beyond. So really, we're representing the work of a larger group here. And as we talk, we'll follow roughly this type of outline. We'll talk a little bit about DH and localized foundations, and I've got a bit of a preface for that, about the notion of publics and how paying attention to publics and drawing in thought about publics for the work we do can help shape the work we do. in specific contexts that we find important. Talk a little bit more about the Implementing New Knowledge Environments Partnership and some of our chief areas of endeavor, and then a few pragmatic and specific interventions beyond rolled into other work that we do. As we begin, I think it might be worthwhile noting that at its most abstract level, what we're really hoping to talk about is what happens when you imagine the humanities, in the context of all of its various points of impact. A humanities that speaks not necessarily just to experts in disciplinary fields, literary studies, history, and beyond. And if you could go back a few slides, Alyssa, I'd appreciate that. But a humanities that speaks to a world at large, that informs and provides, a time-honored role in engagement of culture, in conveyance of culture, its values, its norms, exemplary instances, delighting and entertaining, and informing and teaching all at the same time. And to do that, one has to look beyond. And so in its most abstract form, ours is not necessarily a humanistic intervention, which can sometimes, if it's a theoretical one, for example, be a thought experiment. But we're looking at what happens when you go beyond the thought experiment. What happens when the rubber hits the road, as they say in this part of the world, when you make an idea tangible. That's part of intellectual process too. It's also part of our engagement of a general public beyond. And this is one of the foundations of our Canadian Social Knowledge Institute, based at the University of Victoria, drawing in fact, a lot of our thinking in our Electronic Textual Cultures Lab, our Digital Humanities Summer Institute, largely pedagogically focused, and a community in and around digital humanities tools, techniques, methods, and communities, but also the Implementing New Knowledge Environments project. So we'll go from maybe higher level theoretical orientation to broader audience consideration, and then down to detailed pragmatics about how you bring that about, how you make that work. And we've made a commitment to that amongst our team. Thanks, Alyssa, for pausing, at least on that slide, as I went on a little bit more off script, off road. So let's take a look first at the Electronic Textual Cultures Lab. And our mandate here really is to be a collaborative center for digital and open scholarly practices. Multidisciplinary team of faculty, staff, and students, visiting scholars, and members of the general public, off-campus partners and as well, that we bring together towards this shared vision to engage, facilitate, and promote cross-community digital initiatives that speak to a local audience, a regional audience, a national audience, and well beyond. We've been doing this since about 2004, thanks to the Canada Research Chairs Program, the generosity of the Canadian Foundation for Innovation and the University of Victoria, Faculty of Humanities and Library. We base our thinking around this in something that some may be familiar with, the notion of the Digital Humanities Methodological Commons. This wonderful, slightly messy, rather chaotic, perfectly representative of humanistic intervention map is from Harold Shore and Willard McCarty, who Franz mentioned before. We'll be talking later. This takes a look at the humanities and models it largely as a coming together of ways of knowing, disciplinary groups, and so on. They all come together in this thing in the center of the diagram called the Methodological Commons, which consists of the materials we work with in digitized form and the tools we use to work with them. Predicated on the fact that when we work in the digital humanities, those of us especially doing historical research, we model digitally the historical sources that we have access to. I'm a literary studies scholar. Most of mine are textual, not all of them. But then we also computationally model the tools we use to engage and interact with that, doing analytical work, doing conveyance work, and beyond. And last of three things, and we can move to the next slide. Thanks, Alyssa. As we do that, we also communicate with each other. So we do digital representation, we do digital analysis, and we do digitally based communication, publication, and sharing. And the things that we can talk about in these areas, if we look at them over time, and if we imagine maybe how they would extend in future, is that we have increasingly more data. We have increasingly powerful tools that also work across broader domains of information and bring them together. And we have increasing capacity to speak not only to academic experts in the areas we engage and absorb academic experts' work, but to speak to broader audiences across discipline, across campus, across groups of disciplines, maybe across faculties, but also to the general public at large. This gives us a lot of opportunity for things like collaboration, but also broader reach in what we do. Predicated on this too is the notion of the community of practice. Here I draw from Wenger et al., where in essence a community of practice, say those that do digital humanities and think of them in the public sphere, often have a sense of joint enterprise, a sense of mutual engagement, a sense of shared repertoire, working with materials that we all agree are important, working with them in ways that we all understand to be acceptable and valuable, and sharing those ways amongst our community. So the community of practice as it sits on the methodological commons. We've seen this in digital humanities collaborative networks, but of course well beyond. And this is from an earlier DH conference that took place in Lausanne, mapping the social network of those who are following and engaging the conference via Twitter, a pretty robust group. We also see this across collaborative and shared infrastructures, CenterNet being one associated with the Alliance of Digital Humanities organizations, but also well beyond. Your center in Venice, our center in Victoria, not only exists in and of itself, where a group of people shares resources, but we often share with each other. We share what we're doing at each other's speaker series. At times, we offer access to the materials we have and the programs we have that we're using on them. So a methodological commons, a community of practice, a group of people working together in various ways, sharing what we have, including information and insights. What do we have to look forward to based on what we can deduce from the past in this specific vein? Well, more data yet, building on what we have. More access to powerful tools, which themselves are increasing in their power and their breadth, enabling us to do the things we do more readily to the point where it's changing elements of our research practice. And accelerated communication, not only with other experts, but to the broader publics variously that we serve. This gives us opportunity, specifically working with powerful tools and rich data, gives us a better ability to pose perhaps new, perhaps key research questions with better means of pursuing them. And if we take into account accelerated communication, a better ability to reflect these pursuits in expert communities, but also in larger social societal discourse. We've asserted a number of years ago that we think there's a lot of opportunity here, and the nature of your own speaker series and seminar and focus of the center, a focus that we share here in Victoria and elsewhere, I think speaks to the validity of the pursuit, at least a shared one in our own community of practice thinking. When we started thinking in that way, we wanted to understand what that meant in real terms, not only the thought experiment, but what happens when the rubber hits the road. And so one of our fields of intervention has been in the electronic scholarly edition, where in essence, we tried to enact a typical traditional scholarly edition in the public space of Wikibooks. This is our social edition of the Devonshire manuscript. Work began about a decade ago now, published a little under a decade ago now, where in the world of Wikimedia, we put traditional textual materials and we opened them up to an engaged public, if you will, other experts, but also anyone could access Wikipedia to take a look at the edition, to augment elements of it, to participate in its evolution and development. We learned a lot from that process, and something that we were at the same time also rolling in to our pedagogical engagement in our community of practice at the Digital Humanities Summer Institute. For those new to DHSI, it's an annual training institute for those who do what we do, and partnered with many around the world, a number in Europe very, very nearby to your physical locus in Venice. About 30 institutions and academic organizations partnered, about 850 attendees at the last time we ran it in person, but when we ran it online, we had about 2,000 registrants this past June. And we have an open scholarship stream there, focused on public engagement, social issues, creative approaches to scholarly communication, and beyond. An example of some of the courses, well, Alyssa's been kind enough to lead a course on open access and open social scholarship, but we've also looked at accessibility issues, intersectional feminist, digital humanities, digital games as tools for scholarly research and beyond, race, social justice in the digital humanities context, queer DH, digital storytelling, just to highlight a few of the things that we've done there. What we've learned from that experiential engagement, reflecting ideological, theoretical predisposition, if you will, is that open and social scholarship has significant value. We've worked towards a definition of that value that could mobilize, work with the group of people we imagine being in our community of practice. This in consultation specifically with the Implementing New Knowledge Environments project at a meeting that Alyssa was kind enough to co-chair with me. Here's our definition, if you will. Open social scholarship, the thing that we are trying to move towards pragmatically, involves creating and disseminating research and research technologies to a broad audience of specialists and active non-specialists in ways that are accessible and significant, not just to the experts, but to all we are hoping to engage with our work. We note that it's grown from roots in the digital humanities, the methodological commons, the community of practice, but also aligned with that, and at the same time, open access and open scholarship movements. It's been fostered, if you will, by contemporary online practices, social computing, even into Facebook and Twitter, but also other elements of that type of engagement, and especially the rise we've seen concomitant with all this in public-facing citizen scholarship. So in our work, we've really understood this conceptual foundation that's connected to core activities, where the rubber hits the road, where our activities and energies are focused. One is on explicit consideration of these principles and benefits of approach, something we think about constantly, even as we're enacting them in real space and real time. We recognize awareness raising is a really important part of this, pertinent to context and concept, depending on the audiences being engaged. And sometimes speaking, across all those audiences, contributing to training and engaging in exploration, relating principles and practices of those engagements within and importantly beyond academia, and ensuring appropriate structures of support and recognition. Now, as we've tried to, I'm going to say, operationalize this, that is, give firm foundation and real-time exemplification of this, we found that this involves some retooling. And specifically, a retooling at the conceptual level of understanding who it is we're speaking to. And here I'll hand over to Alyssa. Sorry, Alyssa, I can't do your slides because you're running them.
That's quite all right. I can handle the slides. Thank you very much, Ray, for giving us that foundations overview. I'd like to pivot a little bit now and talk about publics. And so before we get into publics, I thought it might be useful to sort of define what this means. And so publics, in the plural, acknowledges that there is no such thing as one generic public. There are many different communities, many different individuals who form different publics, and these publics form based on how they are addressed or how they identify or what their interest is, what they work in, etc. And for this, we really draw on scholars like Michael Werner. You can check out Publics and Counterpublics, for instance, for more information on that kind of definition of publics. Where we are especially interested in the notion of publics is around community engagement. And so this is within this larger umbrella of open social scholarship. We believe that working more openly means that we need to move from an audience mindset to a public's mindset. So what does that mean? Often in scholarly communication and academic publishing, we sort of think of producing research as a one-to-many trajectory. So I write the article, I publish the article, I put it out into the world, and legions of people, or at least 3 or 4, hopefully read it. So we want to really shift from that idea of producing research output to a general audience, of making the thing and just sending it out the door, to connecting and engaging across communities over areas of mutual interest and concern. So I feel like I'm probably preaching to the choir a little bit since you're at the Venice Center for Digital and Public Humanities, but we do want to really explicitly connect excuse me, the notion of publics with digital humanities and talk about why we think publics is such a natural fit for digital humanities. First of all, just pointing to the rise of publicly oriented work, of public humanities projects. We've seen a lot of this over the last couple of decades. Seen an increased attention to engaging across communities, and to acknowledging that many different communities have different needs, different interests, different reasons to come to the table. We also think that DH is quite well positioned for this work because it is often already open. We see a real commitment to open source in the digital humanities community, as well as to open access publishing. The work is often online, available online already, and is frequently, again, because of how DH is constituted as a field, frequently interdisciplinary. A lot of our thinking here has really been informed by Kathleen Fitzpatrick, and I would definitely point to her most recent book, Generous Thinking, if you're interested in more of this connection. So how do we engage publics through the Canadian Social Knowledge Institute in our different initiatives, the Digital Humanities Summer Institute, Implementing New Knowledge Environments Partnership, and Electronic Textual Cultures Lab? Well, we really tried to manifest public's thinking in our research design. So when we are sitting down and we're at those early stages of a project, we're really trying to think beyond what is potentially a more like conventional academic scholarly communication modality or research creation modality. We also, especially through the Inc. partnership, are really focusing on researcher connections and collaborations with different communities. We like to emphasize this in our activities that are based in our Electronic Textual Cultures Lab, the ETCL, especially something called the Open Knowledge Program, and Ray's going to speak to that later, so we'll get in depth there. This has been a big policy area interest for our partners, and it's also become quite central to the design of our current large-scale initiatives, which again, we're going to jump into as well. So with that, I'm actually going to pass it back over to Ray for an introduction into the Inc. partnership, and then I will be back to talk about the Policy Observatory and our Canadian Humanities and Social Sciences Commons.
Oh, thank you, Alyssa. So the Implementing New Knowledge Environments Partnership is generously supported by the Canadian Social Science and Humanities Research Council under their partnerships program. European equivalent is the European Research Council Synergies program. And it brings together quite deliberately leaders of many kinds: scholars, policymakers, libraries, research computing organizations, interest groups of various kinds, post-secondary institutions, and well beyond, with the aim of realizing this vision of open, inclusive, and publicly engaged scholarship that serves both academic interests and the larger conceptual engagement points in society at large. As articulated, we feel that our areas of challenge are not just around the sort of historical literary studies research that I grew up with and trained in, but rather we're looking well beyond in areas, in fact, represented by the breadth of experience and expertise in our partnership, including economic, infrastructural, access-oriented, and implementation-oriented. So our goal is open social scholarship. We pursue this in a number of ways with a really wonderful group of people. And our larger team, some of these names will be familiar with you, includes myself, Alyssa, Lynn Siemens, John Bath at Saskatchewan, Constance Crompton at Ottawa, Tanya Neiman at Érudit in Montreal, Laura Estel at St. Francis Xavier U, and John Sokolowski at Katie. We have 29 research partners that span the breadth of of what I was mentioning before. 26 researchers, half are co-applicants, very engaged in the work, and the others are collaborators, still very engaged, but also providing broader contextual expertise as well. Disciplinarily, those who exist in academic disciplines in recognizable ways. We've got a group from book and media studies, library and information science, publishing in various ways, management and policy in various ways, 8 disciplines of the humanities and social sciences, others across campus, including computer science and applied science in various ways. Our partners include not only a number representing institutional and institutional disciplinary pursuits, but groups like, and I'll just bring a few for suggesting the diversity here, the Public Knowledge Project, which produces the open journal system software so many of us are familiar with. Eridi, I mentioned before, which is a platform for electronic academic materials and beyond, existing Canada-wide, but moving beyond as well. Groups like Compute Canada Federation, and which began as a high-performance computing infrastructure facilitator Canada-wide, but now exists in the center of the methodological commons, uniting all academic disciplines in and around shared infrastructures. The Canadian Institute for Studies in Publishing, the Canadian Federation for Humanities and Social Sciences, and we should go to the next slide, but a really wonderful group that represents in toto the community, a large community we're hoping to engage. Our funding exists much as per this slide in an area where there's a fair bit of academic expenditure and an uncountable amount of monetized engagement in the world beyond academia. Our clusters attempt to engage our main areas of pursuits. One's connection, another's policy, training is a third, and community is a fourth. And I'll talk just a very little bit about these clusters before handing off to Alyssa. In fact, I may be handing off almost after this slide. The connection cluster is one that Alyssa and I co-direct. And our main research question here is, how can open online spaces support the humanities and social sciences, broadly construed, not just experts? Much beyond. Our objective really is to strengthen open research, communication, and our key output is something that Alyssa will speak to right now, the Canadian Humanities and Social Sciences Commons. Alyssa?
Thanks so much, Ray. Yes, we wanted to give you a sense of some of the key initiatives of the Inc. partnership. And so one of those is the Canadian Humanities and Social Sciences Commons. So this is an open online space for Canadian humanities and social sciences researchers and stakeholders to come together to share information and resources, to make connections, to build community. If you want to take a look at the site, the website is hsscommons.ca. Some of its key features it is being developed on Canadian digital research infrastructure. It is being held on Canadian servers. The prototype that we are working on right now is built on a software platform called HubZero. This is an open source software platform originally developed out of Purdue University, used for many different academic commons across North America. On the platform itself, we have user profiles, single sign-on connected to either ORCID, or if you are at a Canadian institution, something called the Canadian Access Federation. There is an open access subject repository that does assign digital object identifiers and can be for really any sort of humanities and social sciences connected output that you might have. There's a project development space. This connects in with GitHub, with Google Drive, and with Dropbox. And there are various sort of research sharing, communication, and project management tools. So why are we building this thing? Why is this something that we think is important for the research community? We think that it is necessary to have a space to help everyone who is involved in humanities and social sciences to establish a professional online presence, to increase their research impact and visibility, to share their publications and research projects a little bit more easily, streamline some of that sharing, to create and participate in collaborative projects, to communicate with colleagues across fields, across disciplines, to promote and coordinate events, also to just kind of, in doing all of this, be supporting the disciplines of the humanities and social sciences, and integrating things like metrics and altmetrics, which I'm not sure what the situation is like in Italy, but I know over here in Canada, our administrators are very keen on. We have a number of project partners on this initiative, many of whom Ray had already went through when he talked about our Inc. partners. And this is just an example. Of course, as I said, you can pop onto hsscommons.ca and set up a profile and check it out yourself. But this is an example of what a user dashboard looks like. This is our repository. So as I said, if you upload anything into the repository, it's assigned a digital object identifier, a DOI. You can choose which license you would like to apply to it. We have all of the Creative Commons licenses as options right now. This is what an article or a research output would look like when you put it into the Commons. This is a publication. My colleague Caroline Winter put this in. She actually wanted to share her a syllabus that she created. And now this is just going to be a quick screencast, a quick recording of what a project development space looks like. So this is sort of the main page of a project development space. You can add different collaborators onto the team. You can have a repository for that project development space itself. So you ensure all of your resources are shared. You can connect into files. Again, sorry, this is going a little bit fast, from other projects. You can also have, for project management purposes, a to-do list, so a shared task list, and assign tasks to different team members. Finally, you can connect different publications to the project itself. All right. So where are we going with the Canadian Humanities and Social Sciences Commons? As I mentioned, it is in development right now. We have done a few rounds of user testing so far, and we are now onboarding some communities into the Commons itself. In future, we are really interested in integrating this more with institutional repositories across Canada, which are currently a little bit siloed at each institution. We are looking to onboard a lot more humanities and social sciences societies working with the Federation for the Humanities and Social Sciences. We want to really increase our interoperability with ORCID. Ideally, we want the system to be set up in a way that you can come to it as a user, you can log on with your ORCID, with that persistent identifier, and it will auto-populate all of your research, all of your CV materials, so there's less like manual upload that has to happen. We're also interested in working with other disciplines to see how this could be adapted, repurposed for their disciplines. Again, everything is open source. It is all available on GitHub, so anybody can kind of set up one of these instances themselves. And within that realm, we're also thinking about how to set this up in different countries as well. So we're working with our colleagues in Australia right now on what a commons might look like for them. But I think really this could be scaled up and set up anywhere around the world. So if you're interested in testing out the Canadian HSS Commons, we are always happy to have people come in and kick the tires and try to break stuff and tell us what's going wrong. I know this is a really long URL, but after this slideshow, I'll make sure to just copy this and pop this in the chat. And again, feel free to sign on and check out the system. Ray, would you mind if I just continue to go through the clusters and I'll talk about the observatory? Okay, great. So another Inc. cluster is the training cluster, and this is really connected to our Digital Humanities Summer Institute, as well as other digital humanities training that's happening across Canada. It's co-facilitated by Connie Crompton at Ottawa, Laura Estel at St. Francis Xavier. And their research question is, what types of training improve digital engagement? They want to grow expertise, especially in open scholarship, in digital scholarship through training, and are coordinating a open scholarship training program. Another cluster is our community cluster, co-facilitated by John Bath at U Saskatchewan and John Sokolowski at Acadia. Their research question is, which humanities and social sciences open scholarship practices engage the public? And they want to develop basically best practices for community engagement around humanities and social sciences in particular. So in the Canadian context, we do have a lot of kind of best practices that have been developed, for instance, in health sciences around community engagement, or in biology, in ecology, but we don't really have a kind of how-to for how to do this in the humanities. Through this cluster, there are a number of public digital scholarship initiatives that are being developed. Our final cluster is our policy cluster, co-facilitated by Tanya Niemann at ALD and Lynn Siemens at UVic. The research question is, how does policy affect open scholarship? And really with the aim of engaging and serving anyone across Canada who's interested in policy around higher education, around research, etc. And the key activity and output here is the Open Scholarship Policy Observatory, which I'd also like to just do a quick overview for you. So the Open Scholarship Policy Observatory, again, you can check this out, quite a long URL, but ospolicyobservatory.uvic.ca. This is really an online hub for open scholarship policy. It tracks changes in open scholarship policy in Canada as well as around the world, and integrates responses from the community. So through this website, we're really just bringing together summarizing policies, summarizing related resources and movements to try to make them a little bit more accessible for researchers, librarians, anyone in scholarly communication, policymakers. What we found is that there are so many movements in Canada and around the world having to do with open scholarship, but it's just a little bit too much information for everyone to individually go out and parse. So instead, we're trying to do basically a service for our community by collecting all of this information, summarizing it, and posting it in sort of easy to read posts. We're moving toward a second iteration of the site. It currently has 5 components: observations, responses, policy collection, clusters, Twitter, and the editorial team is my colleague Caroline Winter, working with myself and Ray. So what does this look like? Observations are really analysis of policy and policy changes related to open scholarship. We publish them both in English and French because Canada is a bilingual country. We discuss the policy, we integrate responses from the Inc. partnership and other folks who are connected to us. And you can check out some of our recent examples if you'd like. The policy collection is really based on a collection that RoarMap has put together. If you're familiar with RoarMap, it is updated and we have an archive of the policies as PDFs connected to it just for easy download. And we're also, of course, on Twitter, as everybody else is. Our Twitter account is Inc. Project. For this policy observatory project, we use the hashtag OSPolicyObs. So if you want to go and check that out, you can see really a collection of everything we've been working on. And with that, Ray, I'm going to pass it back over to you to talk about some of our Electronic Textual Cultures Lab and Canadian Social Knowledge Institute interventions.
Great, and thank you, Alyssa. And before I do that, I'll go back to the big conceptual frame. So the Implementing New Knowledge Environments project, in essence, is a vehicle that reinforces our broad community approach to ensure that we're seeing more than, well, just me as literary studies scholar in training, at least at the outset, would see, to ensure that we're representing the broad facets, aspects, concerns, and needs of this broad community, not only those who are producing humanistic scholarship, but those who are engaging it in many, many different ways. The HSS Commons is a way, if you will, of making visible, making manifest, bringing together in a community of practice framework and a methodological commons framework. A lot of what the Canadian HSS community is doing. You say, why Canadian? Why so much Canadian here? You might also say, why not just follow the Humanities Commons Initiative, and formerly MLA Commons in the United States? You know, we're partnered with them. Interestingly enough, so clear to many of our partners, less clear to us initially, so clear to many of our partners was the advantages that working within a Canadian sphere for this had, specifically around the legalities of information sharing, licensing, copyright, because Canada has a completely different legal system than the US-based Humanities Commons, completely different than many parts of Europe and so on. So a nationalized infrastructure that could, as Alyssa suggested, point out and engage other infrastructures beyond our national borders made the best sense. Something so clear to our partners, many of whom deal with legalities around academic information sharing every day in detailed ways, but not initially clear to us. So we were very glad for that intervention and contribution on their part that allowed us to see where to put our efforts, again, in collaboration with groups like Humanities Commons and beyond. And same with the Policy Observatory. Understanding that type of frame and others, very important to us as we shape our own work. And now I'll move on to some more of those interventions. Speaking first of the, excuse me, the Open Knowledge Program. And this is something we're enacting locally and offering as a toolkit to others as well. And this is what we do in our Open Knowledge Program based at the University of Victoria, is we invite researchers, community members, those attending our Digital Humanities Summer Institute to participate in a variety of our open scholarship initiatives. We make lab space, physical lab space, well, more virtual these days, but we're getting more physically in situ. And we make it a lab space accessible to researchers who share in our mission and cultivate those practices that we've been discussing. We see it as an incubator for open scholarship projects, and we support a cohort and a community by providing that workspace, consultation, skills training, like thinking, if you will, mutual benefit, project planning, management support, the pragmatics necessary for working in this sphere. Our three main initiatives are roughly as follows. One's a practicum program, which exists academic term by academic term, some extendable and expanded beyond, that really do invite community members and those at the university, at many different types of university involvement, to pursue their own research projects for dissemination engagement following these principles, and including many times using Wikipedia. We have a similar practicum associated with our Digital Humanities Summer Institute, which does bring a number of people to Victoria in non-COVID times. And so we invite them into our lab for a few days before we begin our pedagogical experience together, and do much the same thing. We also have an open knowledge residency for longer term visitors. Here we say 1 week, but we've also rolled it out beyond as well, using intensive program development as a key feature. I'll skip over this since I've already talked about this, but in essence, we're looking at any type of engagement of open scholarship principles in areas that are suitable. And let me give you a couple quick examples. One exists around our honorary resident Wikipedian, who exemplifies the principles and practices of open scholarship engagement using Wikipedia. Christian Vandendorp was our first in 2014 to 16. Constance Crompton, following Aaron Glass, following, and Silvia Gutierrez de la Torre was our most recent honorary resident Wikipedian, something we do in partnership with our university library, our Faculty of Humanities, and our Canadian Federation for Humanities and Social Sciences. Examples of the work that we've done, Lauren-Ellie DeGain, for example, did a piece manifest in Wikipedia, but existent beyond Wikipedia, looking in the context of Victorian literature and women's engagement in the forefront of interactions. Darren Reed came in and did an online map of South African territories, interactive, engaged online, and Anne Stahl has come in and taken a look with her research team of the Banda through time, representing past and present and potential futures. Lisa, you were going to talk about this, I think.
Thanks so much, Ray. Yes, just quickly, because I know we're a bit tight on time now, but finally, we just wanted to talk about our Open Scholarship Awards, which we have been giving out since 2018, so for 4 years now. These are awards that celebrate open scholarship in the community. Last year, we were really excited to give out 2 awards for Open Scholarship Awards: Dorn Larson for American Prison Writing Archive, Gretchen Arnold for Nuisance Laws and Battered Women, and 2 Emerging Open Scholarship Awards for Eric Gonzaba and Amanda Regan for Mapping the Gay Guides, and Alex Shield for her contribution to the people in the text. And I would say, if you're doing open scholarship, or if you know someone who's doing open scholarship, we are currently, our Open Scholarship Awards for 2022 are open. Nominations are due in by September 30th, and we really encourage you to nominate someone you know, or to nominate yourself, which is totally encouraged. So please check out our website for more information on that if you are interested. Okay, and with that, I think that we will wrap up. Ray, is there any final words that you wanted to share before we go to Q&A?
Oh, I think we should go straight to discussion. But thank you again for the opportunity to share what we're doing conceptually, ideologically, manifest disciplinarily or cross-disciplinarily at the institutional level with a really wonderful group, research team, and those beyond a typical academically focused research team. It's a real pleasure to share this with you.
Yes, thank you from me as well. I'm really looking forward to your questions.
Yeah, thank you both very, very much. I can't think of a better introduction to this very elaborated field, and I'm sure that was also for several participants today a surprise to see this field so much developed with so much not only theoretical thought brought into the field, but so with very concrete developments, platforms, societies, methods, and we definitely need your slides for our seminar. So if you, you promote open social scholarship, so I'm sure you will be happy to share the slides with us. So that's good for the students. So relax, students, you can go back to the slides, and we will definitely get back to this during the classes, Stefan or me. So I won't do too much talking here. The floor is open. So for really, there very basic questions are very welcome. So to clarify the concepts or details of whatever has been mentioned here by Alyssa and Ray. You can post your question in the chat. I can read it. You can also just raise your hand. You can also shout if you don't manage to either of these opportunities, and we will have hopefully we'll be able to give everyone the possibility to give here to make a question, comment, suggestion. Okay, so I try to follow the chat, but you can also raise your hand. You are very much invited to activate your video, but you don't have to, of course, but it's always nicer and fairer to the speakers to see whom we are talking to. So if you're ready or still in your pajama, you can leave it. Yes, Ray, you want to say something? You have the first question, Ray. Okay.
Yes, I'll ask a question of the speakers. No, yeah. I want to share with you a question that we received at the European Summer University in Digital Humanities, which took place in early August at Leipzig. when we talked about some elements of this, and the gist of the main question there was this: does everyone want to work, even if they're open scholarship engaged? Does everyone want to work in a community framework? And the suppositions for the question was largely based on the current academic system we face, where Alyssa used the word, for example, siloed. We have disciplines that don't often work together, even though they might be working with some of the same materials, or maybe the same theoretical concepts that then guide their analysis and interaction. We have academic scholars at times who see themselves not in collaboration, but more in competition with, because of the nature of the structures that they themselves represent. And we have universities, even within, say, national structures, but also beyond, that see themselves less in collaboration than they might see themselves in a type of competition. And the reason why I'm just articulating this as a way of answering this is because core to a lot of our thinking, and I'd say core to a lot of digital humanistic thinking, has traditionally been collaboration as almost a foregone conclusion in the community of practice. And by that, it's a common understanding that by working together, we can do more than working independently. By working together with each other in constructive ways, we can affect change. We can contribute more back to the impulses that might drive us to work humanistically. So I just wanted to share a question asked and answered from ISU-DH this past summer.
Thanks, Ray. So here, so is it Angelo? It is possible to put the chat in. Thank you. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, right? I mean, we are working in an Italian academic environment where the disciplines are extremely strong and very independent, and they tend to work very much in silos. Even so, this center and this initiative is very much promoted by the colleagues here from my department, and I think we can call this a success so far, but it has very concrete problems in administration to create positions. Interdisciplinary work is not very easy in the system that we have here. I mean, it's to some extent also in other countries the case, but it's very important to find and work on solutions to balance this.
No, and I would extend that further. I do feel the center is exemplary in that way. The people that, well, if we want to talk about, producers and consumers, and we don't often want to talk about it in that way, but if you look at those who consume the products of the humanities and larger construed, larger context culture and cultural products, they don't understand that someone is in a department of this or a faculty of that. What they understand is the point of engagement and the material that's being conveyed, and what's brought, what's added, and they understand how they themselves have a place in that, whether they see themselves perhaps involved in what's being discussed, analyzed, represented, conveyed, individually or as part of a group that's being addressed by that, whether they see themselves as someone who may have an opportunity to provide input. Perhaps they have specific knowledge. Perhaps they have a reach beyond what they don't necessarily see beyond the confines of the ivory tower academia that many of us who do this sort of work represent. What they don't see is the substructures that we feel are so evident.
No, students to the front here. Stefano, you have the classroom in front of you. So any someone has raised a hand. Sanye, please. Yeah, go ahead.
First of all, thank you for this presentation. Actually, I want to ask something about pandemic, because during the pandemic, we have seen a lot of things, like one of the most important and successful universities opened their classes online. And also we can reach some galleries virtually. We can have a chance to experience them and many other things. On the other hand, we have new medias right now because of the pandemic, like Zoom. I mean, a lot of things that have been developed for a solution to this situation. So I want to ask, what do you think about the effects of the pandemic on open scholarship progress? Thank you.
Ray, do you mind if I speak to that? Great. Thank you so much for your questions in it. Yeah, that's definitely something that we have been thinking about and looking at as well. I would say there are a few different angles to look at it. So first of all, just from an open access perspective, the pandemic has actually boosted up the open access conversation to a place in public discourse that we've never seen before. And so to be able to have people who are not necessarily connected with the university say, hey, what do you mean people aren't sharing scientific research with each other? That has been an incredible kind of generalization of the conversation. So just that in and of itself, I think, is going to be really supportive of open scholarship moving forward. As far as our experiences have gone, I'd point to how we're running all of our conferences and our training institute, which obviously has all gone online. And that's been challenging in some ways, just logistically. But it has also meant that we are connecting and collaborating with people who we never were able to connect with and collaborate with before. So in June, we ran our Digital Humanities Summer Institute online. We had 2,000 people, individual registrants, for that program. And there are people from all over the world who, if we were holding this in person, wouldn't necessarily have been able to take 2 weeks off of work, get a plane ticket across the country and come to Victoria to be with us in person. So it means that we are able to connect at a scale that we weren't able to before. So I would say in that way, in kind of a community building way, the pandemic has actually allowed us to do some things that we couldn't do before. What remains to be seen is that kind of community sustainability piece. So are we able to build these relationships? Are we able to collaborate with people post-pandemic? And how do we do that when we can't be there in person? I mean, it's so wonderful to be able to connect with all of you who are in Italy and we're in Canada, and that's incredible. But it's also like, what would we have been able to discuss and collaborate and do together if we were actually in the same room? I'm not sure if that was a response to your question or just sort of my rambling thoughts about it.
Yes, thank you. And for the future, what do you think about the new solutions or new progress in this area? Because with this pandemic, right now we know the importance of to be open or online. So does it contribute in perception of this issue? So what do you think about the new progress in this area? Not only for academic ones, I mean for everyone, for all citizens around the world, because we know the importance of being online right now, and does it contribute to this area, this perspective?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much. I think that it really does contribute to it, but I think that we also need to be quite conscientious about the tools that we're using. And even though Zoom is, for instance, very accessible to a lot of us, even here in Canada, where I live, there are communities that don't have internet access and that don't have bandwidth. And so that means when we've moved everything online, it actually does exclude some people who don't have that access. So I think that it's like, in some ways, yes, it has been really supportive of it. And in some ways, it means that some people are being kind of cut out and left behind because they are not able to be connecting in the same way that, much of the world is connecting. Ray, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
Only to say that fully agree with everything Alyssa said. And one of the things we're doing is keeping our eyes open, our minds open to possibilities, communities, engagement, and beyond in future. So, for example, for our Digital Humanities Summer Institute, we do wonder what the nature of the community is as it exists online and off. Will people have fatigue? And we ask this of a lot of different things beyond the example I'm using. And what may change in future in relation to our own principles, practices, basic assumptions about engagement. Lisa, I don't remember if you drew attention to time zone issues, but it turns out the world does have time zone issues. The sun rotates around. We can't change that. Some of us may be nocturnal to be able to work in Europe from this part of the world, but that's one big insurmountable barrier beyond the ones mentioned. So we're keeping our eyes and minds open about what the future might hold and very interested in being a part of whatever takes shape.
We have a question from the classroom and a question, very specific question from Giuseppe Mariano, whoever is first to capture the microphone.
Yeah,
Giuseppe. Yeah.
Yes, you mean my question. Thank you. I already read an answer here about the research into knowledge epistemology. And so I think that this is a general aspect or field that will include many other aspects. My research nowadays is about Dante, but it has been opened to a lot of other kind of research in history, in medieval time, Renaissance, and so on. So it's widening this, and we have to deal, of course, with the digital humanities in this time. And the field is evolving and enlarging so much that now the problem is also linguistic sometimes, not in the sense of each languages, but the human language. So I met a lot of this aspect. And as from me, I don't know about students I'm also a student, but a very old student, not in Ca' Foscari, but in Viterbo. I'm a long, I would say, student in formation, long formation. We are also, as architects, we are obliged to have a long life formation nowadays. So my last interest is this general aspect of knowledge and epistemology. So as I'm coming probably to Canada, to Toronto, but probably also for the Italian groups and the Dante project this year, I will be interested. I've been invited in Victoria Island from France many times, so I will be interested maybe if, also to visit your place if you have any chance. But however, I don't know if my question can be divided with others. It's more general, I think. It match a lot of other aspects, of course. So I cannot discuss maybe this problem. But I found this interesting even for us, history, archaeology. In all fields, we have this problem of knowledge, truth, and what is fake or not true aspects that we cannot discuss this. But I will write to some of you if you are interested to share also this with you or with other students. If I don't know if I explain this, but no, this is general, so too much large for the specific interest maybe. Thank you very much. Sorry to take your time, but
thank you. So I don't know if you want to comment on this, but I think otherwise I can read the question I skipped here in the chat from Ilaria. So they don't have a microphone, so I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. I will cut my.
Thank you very much. No, that's fine. Yeah. So about the fellows participating to the project, what is the typical profile of someone who is not part of academia? So that's a very, very good question. And Alyssa, if you want to reply to both question, or you have already posted something in the chat, otherwise Ray.
Absolutely happy to talk a bit about that. There is something in the chat as well. First, a quick response to Giuseppe, to you. Thank you so much. And Alyssa's already answered some of this in the chat, but very happy to continue the discussion in meaningful ways. And if you find yourself in Victoria, anyone finds himself in Victoria, Canada, in British Columbia, on Vancouver Island, the furthest west institution of higher education, I believe, in North America. Anyways, do drop by, send us an email. We really enjoy talking about these things. In terms of the typical type of person who might come and participate in an open research project with us through our programs, the type of fellow who participate is very much, as Alyssa suggested, excuse me, in the chat as I see, varied. Oh gosh, no, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong bit of the chat. At any rate, there is really no typical type of person. The one thing that unites those that we've had the pleasure and privilege of working with is that they have a desire to engage, and they always have something to share. And this is one of the really interesting things about public scholarship, particularly if you look at, I don't know, even early crowdsourcing experiments. The people who are involved, especially those who contributed, express not only interest, but the ability to convey that interest into something very real and tangible. So I go back to one of the Anglo world's earliest examples, and that's Transcribe Bentham. Some of you may be familiar with this. Perhaps you're using it as a case study at some point. It's one that's been written about a fair bit. A large number of community-oriented scholars, like we might talk about in our programs, but we've documented this less well, so I'm using an external example. A large number of community scholars representing all kinds of different backgrounds, but ultimately a very small group of those that contributed most wholly and fully. So in addition to breadth and interest, you also have the ability to contribute, which can mean a whole bunch of things. Could be time, could be inclination, could be specialist knowledge, and it could be considerable desire. There's another project that we often talk to about this, and it's one that is digitizing ships' logs historically, particularly related to weather. How fascinating. There are people who are really, really interested in weather and have a knowledge of not only meteorology, I guess we might call it. I don't know how well that translates, but also nautical history. And they're very interested in sharing that and engaging and learning more along the way. And these projects, like our programs, attempt to provide a structure for those very positive impulses across a group of people by no means homogenous, very diverse, united only by those things. Alyssa, you may have something more sensible to augment my answer with.
No, I think that was great. And I just popped in the chat that often, just to give kind of a pragmatic example, we're working with people who are retired, or we are working with people who are volunteers at museums, we are working with people who work in galleries, those sorts of groups. And yes, I will respond as well to Giuseppe, and apologies, I don't know any Italian, so I've probably said your name incorrectly. But yes, we do think a lot about epistemology, especially around how knowledge has been created socially over time. And so we've done a lot of research into that area. And I would just echo Ray's invitation that if you are in Canada, please do come over to the University of Victoria. We'd love to sit down and talk with you about this.
Thank you very much indeed.
More questions from the classroom to put in that chat. Otherwise, from the audience connected via Zoom, I think there's room for 1 to some more questions. Don't be too shy. I know it's the first performance here for most of the participants here, so we all have to get used to it, but there's nothing to fear, and there are no stupid questions. It's clear anyway, also from any background. So this is an interdisciplinary seminar, and for this, thank you, Giuseppe, as an architect, so you're very, very welcome. Stefano, do you have any other candidates in the classroom? Okay, we don't have to force any question. I think that was a lot of information to digest for everyone. So, and not only the students, also I need your slides, especially as regards the value of open social knowledge and scholarship, because we often have to argument and discuss and justify our activities. I mean, it's always well regarded from administration and from the leaders of universities. We have some impact on communities, but in the disciplines, of course, the value of public scholarship is always questions, and the only interest of those who are rooted in the disciplines is what's the scholarly value, added value. Does public scholarship add scholarly value? And if not, then it's only additional and actually not really worthwhile to be spent precious time of a scholar that then maybe others can do it, journalists or anyone else. So maybe if you want to comment on this, because that's something I think, especially in Italy, which is affects us here as a center who is promoting public and open scholarship. That would be my question.
Ray, would you mind if I popped in on that? Great. Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for the question, friends. That is definitely something that we hear over here in North America as well, is that this sort of work has been, critiqued for being kind of like extra, for not being pure research, whatever that's supposed to mean. And so I would say that really, at the intellectual foundations of our work are rooted in knowledge creation. They are rooted in collaboration. They are rooted in the value of interdisciplinarity. And we are sort of constantly making what I would call like academic arguments for the value of this work. Sometimes those fall on deaf ears, but my own argument for it would be that there is so much value that happens when we open up our work. There is so many possibilities. There are so many directions that we can go in, that if we stay really narrowly focused on what the discipline has been and what the scholarly tradition has been, that we miss. And so I think there is within our work a really implicit argument for interdisciplinarity and a really specific argument for the value of opening up knowledge creation and knowledge sharing beyond the university. And we can only do that if we are collaborating publicly. It can't be this sort of like one-to-many, here we made this beautiful thing, send it out in the world and no one's going to read it scenario. It needs to be something where we are in dialogue, where we are in communication. And so I'm really heartened by the increase of research around public humanities by people like Kathleen Fitzpatrick and her book, Generous Thinking, that's been so well received, because I think it does mark a little bit of a shift in thinking about, okay, we need to be so discipline oriented and we can only do things that look like traditional scholarship, to what happens when we open that up a little bit? What happens when we work with other people? What happens when we move beyond kind of the confines of our own disciplines, and what can we make? That's a bit idealistic, Ray. I can't believe I'm that idealistic at 9:30 in the morning.
No, you do a perfect job. Very good. Thank you very much.
And just to complement that, but by using an analogy, just because a building is there now, used for whatever purposes it's used now, doesn't mean it's always been there. It doesn't mean it's already been always been used for the same purpose. And it also doesn't mean that its current purpose will be its future purpose. These ideas are shifting constantly. And I think one of the roles we have in the intellectual communities that we might represent is to question, to evaluate, self-evaluate, and contribute to positive change over time. And Lisa, what I heard in your answer too was that positive change over time, being a part of the discussion and being very involved in it in a helpful way.
We have elections in Germany on Sunday, so I hope someone is listening from Germany. But I'm afraid nobody does, except for Holger, my colleague here. office right now. We have a question from Samantha, which is follows up exactly on what both of you just responded to my question. If there are any drawbacks in making everything public and accessible. So that's a good question.
Oh, Lisa, if you'll allow, I'll start, but do you want to sweep? Boy, this is rich. Thank you for such a wonderful question. All the questions have been wonderful. I'm going to be overly reductive for a moment, and then maybe between Alyssa and me, we can lay out some contours of the discussion as we've encountered it. I have no expertise in this, but we have the privilege of working with those that do. Are there drawbacks in making everything public and accessible? Absolutely. Number one, there are categories of information and knowledge that have never been perceived to be intended for public consumption. Sometimes they are associated with cultural practices, sometimes associated with legal practices, which are cultural in nature, I recognize, but I'm using a different category for them, and perhaps beyond. That is, we do have categories of things that aren't for sharing. And so making them public can be a very difficult thing. Accessibility falls in similar categories, but can be a little bit more nuanced. Sometimes it has to do in accessibility, not only with those things that I've just mentioned, but it can also have to do with intention. And specifically something we have encountered via collaboration with our Australian colleagues, but not exclusively with our Australian colleagues, has to do with the intention for information and knowledge to be disseminated. If it's intended simply to be shared with one other person, maybe in the same culture, the same unit within that culture and beyond, maybe only shared during one's lifetime, then if you do anything outside of that, you're really violating intention. And that has been a challenging one to engage over time, particularly with things like photographs of people in archives, which are fine while they're alive. But once they pass, the cultural community understanding of that is that shouldn't be present anymore. Terribly unnuanced in my suggestions here as a response there. Terribly rich area, but Alyssa, maybe you're thinking of more than I've encapsulated here.
No, thank you so much, Ray. Thank you for the question, Samantha. I would say, I'm an open access advocate. I have drank the Kool-Aid. I think open access is critically important, but I also would argue that not everything is appropriate to be available open access. So when we are doing especially this policy development around research and what should be available openly, there has to be these caveats around the fact that there is specific materials that it is not appropriate to be made open. And I think Ray's examples there are great. Another example that I would put out is, for instance, anthropological work that might have been undertaken in the 70s. There might have been an agreement of yes, sure, you can publish on the studies you have done in our community, no problem, with the understanding that in the 70s, that publication was happening on paper and was being given to 25 people in the field, not with the understanding that this is going to be online, openly accessible on the internet for, all of the billions of people around the world. So there are definitely things that are not appropriate to be openly available, I would say another thing that we need to be really conscientious of is that we know that some online spaces are safer than others, and some online spaces are not safe, and some online spaces are not safe for specific research areas. For instance, down in the States and down to the south of us, the last few months, there's been a lot of kind of vitriolic conversation around critical race studies, for instance. And so scholars who are critical race study scholars, some of them have been sort of attacked online, have been drawn into really uncomfortable conversations. And so that is a really challenging space for us because, on one hand, we want to be sharing our knowledge, we want to be connecting with different communities, we want to be, considering academia as a part of the public, right? Considering ourselves as a part of the public dialogue. But then what happens when, in doing so, your personal safety is at risk, right? So yeah, I think that's something that we need to think through a lot. And other people have written on this. Amy Morrison has written on this. Tressie McMillan Cottom has written on this. I would definitely recommend reading them.
Now questions are popping up from the classroom with the delay due to our technical setup here. So two tough questions again from Carlo. How can a totally open and public information cope with the economical needs of the researcher and those sharing the knowledge? And the second part of his question is, could over-information lead to misinformation? So here we come into philosophical, anthropological areas. So Ray, Alyssa?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm going to, Carlo, please correct me if I'm misunderstanding what you're saying here. But I would say that something that is important to acknowledge with like open access publishing is that already most often researchers who are publishing articles are not being paid by the publisher or by the reader for those articles. So if I if I write an article and I send it to a journal, regardless of if it is open or if it is closed, if it is open access or if it is for pay access, I am not getting paid by the journal. I'm not getting paid by the publisher, and I'm not getting paid by the people who read it. So that part of the economic equation actually doesn't exist in that sense. Of course, it is important to acknowledge that people who have academics who are hired at universities, faculty, librarians, etc., are often hired with the expectation that they will publish. So they are being compensated already. They're just being compensated by their employer. So moving into an open system doesn't actually change that economic bit for the researcher themselves. It does potentially change the economic model of the publisher. And so depending who you're publishing with, that's something that they'll be thinking about a lot. And I would say, I can talk about open access till the cows come home. So if you're, I'm not sure if you have that phrase in Italy, I can talk about open access forever. So if you're really interested, please just send me an email. I have a lot of resources I can share with you. Ray, is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
There's a wonderful body of literature specifically on that, and most of it, like literature on any subject amongst experts and beyond, there's a core path. And Alyssa, thank you for walking us through. There's also a lot of divergence of opinion, which I think is a way of talking about the second part of that question. Do you mind if I jump in and engage that too? Could over-information lead to misinformation? Oh my God, yes. We witness it everywhere, right? Where someone advances, perhaps an informed decision, perhaps not, but advances it in a very public way, and then there's a response, perhaps informed, perhaps not. And what that leaves us as individuals, representing larger society, is to have to be able to read and understand and parse and deduce for ourselves what the foundation for veracity, connection to reality, and others is. And I think one way of combating, if you will, the concerns around misinformation is to ensure that socially and societally, we are ourselves better informed citizens. Training, education, awareness raising can really lead to that. I think engagement from the scientific community, meaning all intellectual academic community and everything we might involve in that, engaging into larger social societal discourse helps with that, providing we have the shared common understanding that educational engagement has value and is good.
We have another question and a comment. Georgia, if you like, you can also raise your question if you're in Zoom yourself. Otherwise, I can read it. You are there. I can see. Yeah. You have to unmute your microphone.
Yeah, sorry. It's just that my connection is not really stable, so sometimes it's jump. But yeah, well, my question was about like what kind of community you're like willing to engage to work with, and if you have like to work with community of people that, for example, didn't have access to education at all, so different kind of like community of people.
Yeah, thank you so much. That is such an important question. And so I would say a few things. To start with, we want to be really cautious that we are not saying, hey, we're the experts and we have all of these things to give you. And so we don't want to take kind of a paternalistic relationship with non-academic or people who are kind of aligned with academic situations and try to tell them what they should be interested in or tell them what they should want. So that's kind of always the framework we're working with. But I would say your question is so interesting because that's something we've been really working with ourselves is, how do we kind of open this up as broadly as possible without telling people what they should be interested in? And so our colleague John Bath, who's at the University of Saskatchewan, he is a fine arts professor. And the work that he has been doing is to do digitization, basically like virtual reality and augmented reality art exhibits. So he goes into galleries and basically replicates what the galleries in the major cities in his province are doing, and then goes around to communities all over the province and sets up these virtual reality exhibits for people who have no connection with universities, who may or may not have been through the education system. But it's really a way to instead of saying hey, we have this stuff over here that you should come to us and you should check out over here, of saying, hey, I'm going to come to you and here is what we're working on. Is this something that's interesting to you? So trying to really meet people where they are rather than having them sort of come to the university, which can be very intimidating and very difficult to know how to connect with. Does that answer your question at all? Okay.
Yes, thank you very much.
Looking at my clock, we are reaching the end of the seminar. There's a comment from Giuseppe, and I also was thinking of academia at you compared to the portal that you created, the HSS portal, and so. Many peer scholars are very unhappy with academia at U because it's not as open as we would like it to be open and has many issues. And the portal that you developed has all the advantages such a portal should give without the shortcomings. So if you want to comment briefly on how to compare on existing platforms.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you're right. Or not had much more. My articles have never been sold, and I receive many visiting also on my account, my profile, but there is not much exchange. Let's say only a few people post something, and so I don't have actually much more. I visited others. Sometimes, as you say, it's not possible to read, or there are only they say what is the publication. But I started with that, and now I'm going in a museum project, as someone said, about Dante. But I discovered that each piece of this knowledge can be combined in a wider aspect where the knowledge, the truth, and many other aspects which we cannot discuss here can be combined, even very far from linguistic to archaeology to history. It seems like something ideology, but it is practical. I've seen that many pieces is like in a big puzzle, like you say, Rubik cube. You can connect and move up and down many questions, and then you can put many together. But I will not say much more. When I say I start to do it in my small area as a researcher, I'm also teaching sometimes in universities abroad. I can speak a little bit English compared with many Italians, especially colleagues. But thank you. I will not disturb your lecture. I hope we can have a later better exchange. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very, very much. So thank you also, Ray, for that. There's a link, Giuseppe, in the chat posted by Ray for a blog entry on the academia edu problems issues. So that's very, very useful. Thank you, Ray, for this. If you want to comment on this, and yeah, otherwise I read the next, maybe the final question from the classroom. Oh, this is from the classroom, Claudia Simonelli. So I think we have two last questions. It's from Claudia. If you are connected, you can ask your question also directly to our guests. Yeah. There you are.
Hi,
yeah.
hi. It's just a notation. Thank you for the presentation. I was just wondering the connection between a scholarly edition of a text from a manuscript, and you explained it so well. So I was checking on the page of the Devonshire book, and I've noticed that the links to the encoded materials in TEI are not working. So I'm wondering if there is any reason for that. So because we are talking about open materials, and that's just a simple notation. And I want to ask that.
Thank you, Claudia, for your engagement and also for pointing that out. The reason for the link not working is mundane, but absolutely core to things we do online. We changed our servers. We didn't update the link. We're going to go and do that right after we talk. So sorry about that. It'll be up there by the end of the day. We changed our servers only at the beginning of the week.
Sorry about that.
Thank you. Thank you.
And here comes our last question from Ilaria from the classroom. Is it sufficient to just publish the project's work? How could the attention of people be channeled or focused on specific projects? And I see another question, but okay, that will be the very last question. So.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. That is actually sort of at the heart of what we're working on right now, is that, we believe in open access, we believe in open access publishing. And so that's sort of the first step. But how do we really engage with communities around shared areas of interest? So I would say, our new Inc., our round of funding just started this year. So check back in a couple of years. But what our researchers are finding is that, again, as I was saying in response to Georgia, is that when we are, working with communities from the get-go, when we are engaging with people with shared interests, from day one, and working to build community and dialogue around shared areas of interest, that's when we're having the most success with having a lot of engagement around our research projects. We're seeing less success when we just, make something and then throw it out into the world and say, hey, I hope 2 people read it. So I would say, trying to connect with people really from the get-go of a project. And then, beyond that, we can definitely go into conversations around, what public scholarship looks like and what it means to be a public scholar and what it means to be engaged in kind of the dialogic community, rather than just thinking of ourselves as solo scholars who are just focused on our own work and just putting out our own research.
Yes.
Yeah.
Engagement is active. It's not a passive act. If you put something out there, you also need to know for whom you're putting something out there and how to ensure that that you're bringing them into the work that you do.
Sorry.
No, sorry.
I know we're short on time.
I just don't want to overburn your time. You have a day, an afternoon to save. Alyssa, if you have something to add, please.
No, really, I will go on forever, so I will stop myself there. Thank you.
We have a question. I would not like to end on you mentioning all the critics to your works, but it's an interesting question, but we should end on a positive note, of course. So what the question is, do you also get critics or just positive reactions? So maybe the answer is no, but of course you. So that is an interesting question, yeah.
There's the joke in some academic circles about the second reader. You send your work out for peer review. First reader likes it and says lots of positive things. The second reader is, oh my God, criticism. Both's valuable. I mean, really, if we're talking about engagement and This is where I was extending Alyssa's wonderful comments on Illyria's question too. If you put something out there, you have to expect response. It's part of, especially if you have an academically oriented mission, it's part of why we exist. We don't exist only to be authorities on areas that we know a lot about, but we're there to facilitate. We're there to facilitate engagement, discussion, dialogue. And that means hearing things that aren't necessarily praise and thinking about them and responding to them as part of this ongoing process of greater understanding, let's say, in society at large, even if it is in a very narrow version of society at large, or a very narrow topic or something like that. That is part of it. We have had both praise and involvement and criticism as well. And what we try to do with that is to channel it in exactly that direction. Both of those things and everything in between are engagement. And engagement is positive. And if you make a commitment to work in the public sphere, you accept and embrace that notion of engagement, whatever it may be. Christian Vandendorp, when he gave his inaugural lecture many years ago now at University of Victoria, as our honorary Wikipedian in residence, talked about the full spectrum of positive engagement. And he said, and I'm pretty much quoting him, he said, it's everywhere from "you are an asshat" to "this is brilliant," maybe with a theoretical bent there. It's everything. And the more we understand that and engage that and consider that part of our valuable role in the society we serve, I think the better. I might be naive in this, but it's something I do believe in. And I've always found Christian Vandendorp's work worth paying attention to as well.
That's really useful. That's you managed to end on a positive note, Alyssa. But you can have the last word if you like. If you want to have something to add here, please.
Oh, thank you. No, I would just agree with absolutely everything Ray said. We do see ourselves as a part of a community and a part of a dialogic community. So when you're in conversation with people, they're not always going to agree with you. And we've learned a lot that way. And it's really important to us that all of the work we do is serves a community and we see ourselves as being in public service. And so it's really important for us to hear those criticisms and for us to hear, like, that doesn't work. And then we can think about that. We go to our team and we decide how to move forward. So all to the good.
Thank you very much. So that was a very interesting discussion. I'm very glad. And I think the students can take a lot with them home today, if they're not staying home anyway. And me too, and everyone else who joined us for this seminar from inside and outside Ca' Foscari in Venice. Thank you very much indeed, Alyssa, Ray, for this excellent start for our autumn and winter cycle of seminars in Digital and Public Humanities, organized by the Center for Digital and Public Humanities. And thank you also for Stefano, who was struggling today in the arena, in 2 arenas. So that's a very difficult task, but you made it. And I think all the questions have been addressed and answers. And yeah, thank you very much, everybody. Usually, if you were here now, we would have an aperitivo on the Campo Margarita, but these seminars, or the most seminars, have been online because the pandemic is already such a long time. So we will have it alone here. So, but I hope there will be another occasion. So have a good day, have a good night, evening, everybody. Thank you very much, and see you in 2 weeks or in 2 days or tomorrow. And bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.